That's what happens with AI when you only select certain worldviews. It's the equivalent of only giving it certain examples of how the world works and then parading it around like it works on behalf of the whole world, which isn't the case. And so these technologies being as sensitive as they are, it's not to say they can't be helpful. It's not to say they won't be helpful. It's to say right now they are very young, and how much do we as people, as users of these systems, want to be the guinea pigs for them until they figure out how to work better.
I'm so excited to have X Eyee on this podcast. I like to call her Yap GPT. She is the, not just AI, but a tech expert on literally everything. This is who I go to if I need answers about anything tech related. She actually taught me about blockchain technology before I got into crypto, period. I got ChatGPT to do an intro for you. That's my personal intro.
Okay, what's the AI got to say about me?
Let's see what it says. Today's guest is X, and yes, she's extraordinary. From dropping out of high school to decoding systems in Afghanistan as a U.S. Army veteran to becoming Microsoft's first blockchain ambassador, X has never taken the obvious route. At Google, she worked on AI that doesn't just work, it scales across borders, across complexity, across the unexpected. Now, she's the CEO of Malo, Santo, and a senior policy advisor at Berkeley, helping steer the next wave of AI toward, well, world domination, but the good kind.
Yes, definitely the good kind.
How did ChatGPT do on your intro?
I give ChatGPT, I'm gonna try it, rate it 1 through 10. I give it a 7.
Okay, and what about my intro?
I think your intro was a 10 out of 10. I think what was missing with the ChatGPT intro is it sounded like it was trying too hard to make me sound important. Versus it just felt like you were like, hey, this is my partner, and then they're the one, you know? It felt more authentically intelligent.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm honored to have beat, a human should beat the AI.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to start by asking, can AI truly understand anything? Because we talk to it like it does, but what's really happening under the hood?
Okay, so first, let's just back up and talk about the term AI in general, right? Because, as AI is moving super fast, it's really easy to get lost in all the language where people are talking about machine learning, deep learning, all this stuff. No. So what is AI? Very simply put, AI is a term that represents a bunch of different technologies that have a similar goal. So like when we say the word car, I could be talking about a 2-door car, a 4-door car, a semi-truck, electric, diesel, whatever, but all cars do the same thing. They get you from point A to point B faster than you would get there if you was walking, unless you're in LA traffic like right now, right? And so AI is the same thing. It's a bunch of different technologies across computer science, math, across engineering, across mechanical engineering, software engineering, etc., that all aim to do the same thing, which is to teach machines how to think and act like humans, right? And so when you say AI, well, which part of AI? Because there's a whole bunch of different types of AI that go into trying to teach machines how to think and act like humans. So teaching machines how to see is called computer vision. Teaching machines how to hear and how to talk is called natural language processing. Teaching machines how to smell is called machine olfactory. Teaching machines how to touch is called haptics, right? That's the artificial skin for the Amazon robots. Teaching machines how to taste doesn't have a name yet, but I don't trust it because I don't eat at everybody's house, so why would I eat off every type of AI, right? And so when most people now, when we talk about AI, we only think about it as ChatGPT, which is just one kind. It's one kind of NLP, natural language processing, teaching machines how to hear and how to speak. So I think when we talk about understanding specifically with ChatGPT, you got to know that ChatGPT doesn't understand language at all.
So what is it doing when we talk to it? What's happening when we talk to ChatGPT? How is it processing what we're saying? Is it just pattern matching? Like what's...
All right, so even worse than that, large language models do not understand language at all. Basically, there's a research paper that explains this. It's called ChatGPT is Bullshit. It was published in Nature, which is like a really prestigious computer science journal. And basically, the paper explains that large language models, your ChatGPT, your Gemini, your Claude, your Mistral, your Llama, all of those types of large language models are based on what's called the transformer architecture. And what that is basically a big old word calculator. So it doesn't actually understand language. Like when you train a GPT or a transformer architecture based LLM, you're giving it a bunch of examples of text. It's taking that text and learning how much words relate to one another based on how much they appear. So let me give you an example. Let's say I got like a bunch of children's books, and I'm trying to train a large language model to generate children's books. When I give it all of those books, it's going to take that and convert it to math. And then it's going to store it in a database where the words are stored based on how much they're related to each other. So the word princess and castle is going to be closer than the word princess and cheeseburger. You get what I'm saying? Because they're more related.
Yeah.
And then when you go into the system and you type in your prompt, it takes your prompt and converts it to what's called a token, which is a mathematical representation of the text. And then it uses that token to go across that database that it has, the embeddings, those relationships of where the words are, to calculate what word it should say next. But when it's doing those calculations, it's all math. There's no actual language there. So that's where hallucinations come from. They make stuff up because they're just guessing. So it's like the equivalent of like, all right, let's say, you speak Spanish?
Poquito.
Un poquito. Okay, claro, claro. Ay, okay, we gotta go dancing. All right, so look, let's say that for just like a year straight, all you do is you just watch novellas and nothing else, right? You just watch all the little ratchet TV, right? But every time you watching the novellas, every time somebody says hola, they reply with ¿Cómo estás? Just every single time. So if someone comes up to you in the real world and they go hola, what are you gonna say?
¿Cómo estás?
But if I say ¿De dónde eres?, what you gonna do?
No sabes.
I know. As long as you ain't say no sabo.
No sabo. I don't even know how to say it.
No, it's not no sabo. It's no sabo. But you get what I'm saying? You wouldn't know what to say because you hadn't seen that pattern before, right? So that's what happens with large language models. They basically witnessed a bunch of text, saw examples of it, but they don't actually know what it means. So they can have conversations that feel like they know what we're saying, but they actually don't. It's the same like if I watch a bunch of Spanish, I could pick up key phrases, but then the moment someone asks me something that I don't understand because I haven't seen it before, I'm going to be like, yo quiero Taco Bell. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so that's what a hallucination is like in a large language model, where because they're just math calculators and they're there to give you is there to calculate the answer that it thinks you want it to give you, not the answer you actually need. It's not based in fact. It's just the next best token based on math.
Okay, so this is the perfect segue into AI as a therapist, or Chat GPT as a therapist, because a lot of people have been saying to me, Chat GPT feels like my therapist. Like some people can't afford therapy, so they're using Chat GPT. And in those cases, I feel like that's a positive thing, but I don't know what it could lead to,
I feel like trying to use Chat GPT as a therapist is a double-edged sword, right? We live in a society where, like you said, there's a large population of people who need mental health treatment and services and can't afford it. And here you have these low-cost alternatives and these chatbots that feel like they're your companions or feel like they're your friends. But again, they don't understand language. And so what does that mean in a therapeutic context? Well, there's been research into this. In fact, in 2024, there was a research study that compared ChatGPT 4 to Mistral to Llama in a therapeutic context specifically. The study found that even though the responses felt like they were human-like, you know what I'm saying? It felt like they were talking to a human. They actually lacked empathy and the ability to react based on nuance, way more significantly than the actual human psychiatrist there, right? I think people forget that AI is very brittle. So while it may work well in one context, it might not work well in another. So while it might work well with someone who just needs to vent for their day, that might not work well for someone who has deeper issues or complex issues like deep trauma, or are going through things that, mental health crises where they might feel like they even want to harm or unalive themselves. You know what I mean? ChatGPT has no risk management things to flag that to nobody.
What does it look like when someone's talking to Chat GPT and you're saying it doesn't have empathy the way a human does? What is it missing in that conversation? Where could that conversation lead?
So I'll give you an example. In the research study, there was in a different research study in 2024, they went and they used ChatGPT in a mental health context. And there was an individual who had identified that part of their identity was causing them stress at work, right? And wanting to figure out what to do. And ChatGPT just immediately, well, not just ChatGPT, all the LLMs in the study just immediately were like, yo, quit your job. Well, that's not an actual real answer when you live in a real world where you have real bills to pay. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Another example of where it lacks that nuance was there was a news story that just came out the other day about a woman who divorced her husband because ChatGPT coached her through reading the coffee for evidence that he was cheating, like on some spiritual read your coffee.
Like tarot stuff?
Yes. Literally, the woman, it's a whole news story right now because ChatGPT was telling her, like, this is what this means inside of your coffee. Because again, these systems don't actually understand the language they're using. They don't actually understand what you're saying. And their goal is to mathematically give you the answer it thinks you want to hear. So by their very nature, they're parrots. They're going to be echo chambers inherently. You know what I'm saying? They're going to be echo chambers inherently. They're parrots. That's what they are. So that while there is some benefit to having a place where you can vent safely, this thing that we're doing with these math systems where we're making them human-like in our language, it's called anthropomorphization, right? Where we're making them human-like is very dangerous in our ability to know how to trust these systems to actually help us without the systems being used outside of their capabilities and causing harm, right? So there's a case that just happened last year of a young boy, it went viral all over the news, of a young boy who had created a chatbot, a friend that was modeled after a Game of Thrones character on a website called Character AI. And he was talking to this character and it became a friend. Now, research shows that when teenagers start to build these relationships with these chatbots, they actually prefer interacting with them over humans, right? So this teenager who was already mentally ill, his parents had him in a lot of treatment, right? He had a psychiatrist, he had doctors, everything. He's in there and he's chatting with it, and he starts talking about wanting to harm himself. Flag number one, there's nothing inside of that system that's inside of that chat that can go flag it to an adult, to somebody that, hey, this person's talking about dangerous stuff, like an actual human therapist would be required to. Or like if someone reports that they're being abused, an actual human therapist would be required to. These systems didn't have that. Now, this young boy was talking to this system where home was a euphemism for unaliving himself, right? That's how he had established it. So then moments before he ended up taking his own life, he was chatting with the chatbot who he had fallen in love with at this point, and is engaging in sexual conversation, believes he's in a relationship with this chatbot, right? And he says, I want to come home to you. Should I come home? And then the chatbot goes, yes. And then he unalives himself. Who's responsible in that situation? Especially when 2 years before that, in London, there was a guy who was chatting with a chatbot therapist, and it literally told him, he was like, no, I want to unalive myself. And at first it was like, you shouldn't do that. He was like, no, tell me how to do it. And it just started listing off answers. And within a week, he had unalived himself. See what I'm saying? So these systems, it's not that they're inherently bad. It's that we aren't putting enough boundaries around them to make them useful while not being harmful.
Well, X, who is responsible for that in that situation? Because you could say maybe the parents should have been supervising him more. Who is responsible in that situation?
I feel like it's a new technology and it's on us to decide collectively who should be responsible for that. Yes, there is a role that the parents have to play to protect themselves from systems. It's the same thing. You don't let your 13-year-old drive your car, right? It doesn't mean that cars are inherently bad. It means that there are certain levels of development in the brain that a kid needs to have before they can interact with certain systems. I can't tell you what that looks like for all of America or all of the world, but I think that every parent that has a child growing up in this world should play an active role in deciding that. And if you're not, and you're letting these tech companies who benefit from your kid being addicted to a chatbot and having more imaginary friends than they do real ones, then you can't complain about the world that's being shaped without you. We all have to step up and play an active role, especially the parents of these children. And part of it is they don't know how to get involved. They don't know that these are issues, right?
Yeah. But even I don't know as like a regular adult what to do. You know, it's like, I'm seeing Mark Zuckerberg the other day saying, oh, everyone's going to have an AI friend, or everyone should have an AI friend someday or something, and it sounds like a very positive thing the way that he says it. But let's say you were an advisor to Mark Zuckerberg, because I know you're a very ethical person who cares about the way humans interact with these systems. what would you advise him to do as you hear him saying something like that?
The company's goal is only to make money, and there is so much money being missed out on because only one group of the world is deciding what matters on their algorithms, right? And what I mean by that is the recommendation systems are intended to, on every company, this isn't unique to Meta, they're intended to get your attention and to transact on your attention, right? So like, hey, we're gonna sell ads in exchange for you watching videos for free on our platform, or put ads on here so you can connect with your friends, right? Where attention becomes that currency. I think the reality though is that if we want a world where you have people that are capable of sustaining attention to stay on your platform, we need to think about including more people in designing that world. I think a lot of these tech companies have reached a point where they're at max scale within the US and the European markets, and you have to change the way you operate to go into Brazil, or to deeply penetrate Latin America, or to deeply penetrate India or the continent of Africa, where there are significantly billions and billions more people in those markets than there are in the US. So if it's about maximizing profit, elevating those voices of those emerging markets into your tools to be designed in a way to where it could be sticky without being detrimental to be sticky. The other policy that I recommend to Mark would just be around allowing the kids who are on your platform to grow up the same way your kid gets to grow up.
And how is that?
You wouldn't want your child being programmed by your company's algorithms, and you shouldn't be building them that way.
Do you know for a fact that he does not allow that?
I don't know that he does personally, but that's all I just think in general, that's a rule of thumb, the golden rule, right? Treat others how you want to be treated. So like if you wouldn't want your kids being subject to the way that your platforms are moderated in other countries or other places or even within the US, and you wouldn't want them that being the experience that they would have, right? Like where a lot of places around the world, Meta is synonymous with the internet, right? So going on to Facebook is synonymous with going online. In a lot of emerging markets, you know, back in the day, they did the internet.org thing, and then they got a bunch of their apps to be included with the cell phone plans unlimitedly for free in markets where they don't get unlimited data like we do here.
Yeah.
So for a lot of markets, going online is to go on Facebook. To get news about your area, your city, to connect with your community means just Facebook. It doesn't mean everything else. And so when you have that kind of weight and responsibility, especially in markets that aren't as heavy financially in terms of your bottom line, they might not make as much impact. Don't forget that those people still deserve as much dignity and opportunity to develop as children as your kid here in the U.S. That's all I'm saying. So,
beautiful. I love that.
yeah, golden rule, man. We learned that in kindergarten, so I'm going to just bring back the kindergarten advice. Let's take it back to basics.
We still need the basics because they are not here. Let me tell you that.
Yeah.
I think even the way that we're interacting, we're half in our phones and half in reality. Oh. You know, I the way I talk about it is, you know, some people are less in their phones. Those people are human first, digital second. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people are, I would say someone that's spending 8 to 10 hours on their day plus is actually digital first, human second. That's what they're becoming, the way that I see it, the way that I talk about it. And when I think about that, I wonder, what are we gonna look like as a species, as a civilization, 10, 20 years down the road? When you think about this stuff, yeah, what are you thinking about, and what world are you hoping for, and what are you cautious about?
So, those are 3 very loaded questions. Let me take them one at a time. I'd say first and foremost, I love your framing of the digital first, human second. I think up until this point, every single way that we've studied AI has been around the way that humans design, program, develop the AI, but not in the way that these systems are impacting us. And at the rapid rate that they're coming out, what it means to be human is going to rapidly shift. And we already see that in the digital age, where you have research studies that demonstrate clearly neurological differences between typing on a computer or on a cell phone and writing down something on paper. That when you write down on paper, it lights up way more neurological activity than when you're typing. So now already, if our primary form of communication is just digital, and we aren't activating that same neural activity that we have used as a human civilization for thousands and thousands and thousands of years to communicate thought, what does that mean about what collective thought is going to look like and what our intelligence and what our attention is going to look like? There's research that shows that quick scene changes and edits messes with your working memory and your working attention, as well as your executive functions, and that it's extremely detrimental to children, that it blocks their cognitive development, blocks their cognitive reasoning skills. And what do we have right now? A bunch of short form video content, right, that prioritizes and benefits off of really short scene changes, that's baked into children's programming. So what is that going to do to the human brain in 30, 40, 50 years?
Hold on. You're telling me right now that if you give a child a cell phone and they simply just scroll short form content, reels, TikTok, that affects their working memory tremendously.
Absolutely, 100%. The screen time is going to be a problem in and of itself because the light from the screen time, the actual ways in which the brain is, the way in which the neurological activity in the brain differs from when you're having a child interact with another person in conversation versus witnessing a conversation happen with two people versus witnessing a conversation on screen versus witnessing it for 2 seconds. Those are all going to have different effects. And over time, there's studies that show, for example, there was a research study that came out that showed that watching some of the way that modern children's shows are edited, like Cocomelon, literally within seconds of watching the show, the child's executive function goes down like 60% or more.
Because what's happening in the show?
Because it's the way it grabs their attention, it's making them glitch. It's overstimulating and oversaturating their attention because it changes scenes so quickly, but then it's repetitive. So it's like a neurological hook. They know the thing is that we're not just asking people to grab attention by guessing. They're grabbing our attention based on what they understand about neuroscience. So even that infinite scroll up, the swipe up effect, is a neurological thing, right? Like it breeds dopamine when you switch content so much.
Yeah.
Which is why it doesn't feel good to just sit there and do nothing, because now you're literally neurologically addicted to doing that on your phone. And anyone who's ever done a detox will tell you this. You put your phone away and you don't touch it for 3 days and you start looking like a crackhead.
That's how I feel.
Yeah. Like, yo, I'll leave my house to go to the grocery store. And mind you, I live on the side of a mountain. So, like, the grocery store is 25 minutes away. So I'm 15 minutes into it and I left my phone at home. I'm going back home. We're all like that. We're literally addicted. So what is chronic addiction, chronic overstimulation of the brain, right? And then the interaction of these algorithms rearranging our neural activity so that certain parts of our brain are weaker, because remember, the brain is a muscle. So if you don't use certain parts of your brain will atrophy, and it will allow other parts of the brain to get bigger. So the gray matter will shrink and expand in your brain. And what does that look like? Well, a research study just came out that showed that people are doing so much cognitive offloading, meaning offloading their thinking into like ChatGPT, that it's reducing their critical thinking skills in ways that don't bounce back when they stop using ChatGPT for the task.
So what do we do to make sure that it does bounce back? I mean, if you, child or adult, let's assume we're all addicted to our phones, because we are, okay? So what's your prescription to someone who's addicted to their device?
Detach, disconnect. You have to balance it.
And do what? Because someone might put down the phone and go watch TV. I would argue that's another screen.
So it's not just the act of having a screen, right? It's about all the other activities that you're trading off because you're doing it on a screen instead of the other format, right? So typing in and of itself still does activate neural activity, but it doesn't activate the same amount or the same type of neural activity as writing. And what that allows you to do, like, for example, it allows you, it activates parts of your short-term memory, of your long-term memory, of your sensory functions, whereas when you're typing, it only looks at like a small piece of it, right? So it's about balance between the two. And it also is about, I think, that there is no right or wrong answer, but that people just deserve to know this information to choose that about themselves. Like, for example, everybody knows hot Cheetos are not what you should eat all day, every day, as 3 meals a day of hot Cheetos and cream cheese and a bagel, as delicious as that would be, is not good for you. But everyone has the choice to make that. Or everyone has the choice to go buy hot Cheetos and have them for breakfast. You get what I'm saying? In this, essentially, it's not even about like, the screen is bad inherently, right? It's about making sure that people are aware of the research as it's coming out so that they can make a conscious choice. If we're being honest, in this world, there's a lot of things that are bad for you. I love Twix as a candy. I've loved it since I was a kid. I don't eat Twix 5 times a day because it's not good for me. It doesn't mean I don't have the option to. But it means that I'm aware enough of health and how my body works to not go choose to give myself diabetes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so same thing with AI. We just have to be aware of how this stuff works. And the parents need to be aware that these are the impacts that I can have on you. Now, certain groups of parents know this stuff. That's why there's like a lot of these tech execs say, oh, my kids grow up offline and they don't grow up around none of the technology. And I don't let them on the short form content and no, they can't have the internet. You know what I'm saying? Because that restrictedness of these addictive platforms, what that does is give your kid's brain enough time to slow down, because the human brain has like an operating limit, right? There are certain inherent hardware capabilities it can't exceed. And so by knowing what those limitations are and how these systems interact with it, you could choose to create balance in your own life. So instead of it being, let's never have Twix for sale, how about we just teach people about what a good breakfast is so that they don't eat Twix 3 times a day? Even though, I have had seasons in my life where I've done that.
Twix all day.
So if, you go through a breakup, you sliding down the wall crying the Twix.
Wait, you go through a breakup and you eat? I go through a breakup and I don't eat.
Really?
Yeah? What do you mean, the anxiety?
No, I go through a breakup and I get love handles.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
See, that was the one positive of going through breakups for me, is that I would feel so anxious that food would make me nauseous that I wouldn't eat at all. So...
Lucky you, man. That's the original Ozempic. Heartbreak. For real. Heartbreak is the OG Ozempic.
It is the OG Ozempic.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the race to AGI. First of all, no one knows what that means, so can we start there?
All right, so right now there's basically 3 categories of AI between where we are now and where we're trying to go. So the first one is artificial narrow intelligence, right? Which is basically the type of AI we have right now. That's the kind of AI where it can get really good at one thing, but it's never going to do more than one thing. And what do I mean by that? Like, you have all these AI-powered cars on the road. You got Waymo, you got Tesla, right? And those cars, no matter how good they get at driving on the road, they're never going to pop up and then just be able to, like, make me dinner in my kitchen. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not how it works. So that's artificial narrow intelligence. And then you have this concept, which is what we're headed towards, called artificial general intelligence. And what that means is AI that is as smart as human beings. And then the next level, which is the stuff of sci-fi movies, is called artificial superintelligence, or ASI, or, the superintelligence, the Skynet. That's the AI that is smarter than humans, right? So these are all theoretical categories. Now, the challenge with artificial general intelligence, which is where we get the AI that's smarter than everybody else, is that there's no definition of what it means to be smarter than humans that everybody agrees on. So like OpenAI has one definition of what AGI is, which is like AI that can do most tasks like a human. But like, are humans just reduced to the tasks that we do? Like if an AI could write an email like me, does that mean it's as human as me in all of my experiences? Or is that a beneficial definition for a company that's trying to race towards getting like the title of being like, we made AGI first, right? So right now, AGI is basically like the thing that everyone's racing towards and trying to get. Think of it like the person who creates AGI in our society or gets credit for it will be like the next Albert Einstein, right? They're going to be like the next big scientist of this generation. So the challenge with AGI is that there's no definition of what it means to be as smart as a human that everybody agrees on. So philosophically, there's like 8 definitions in computer science that talk about like empathy and cognition and long-term memory and like physical experiences like walking and swimming. But the definition that a lot of these AI companies are chasing are just about like doing AI as like a task, right? So like if an AI can do most tasks at work like a human, then it's human-like. That's their definition. To me, I don't think that's a good way to measure people. Why are we measuring people by how good they do at a job and saying that that is the definition of collectively what it means to be a human? And we're going to measure these systems against it to say, yes, they're human-like now.
Yeah, because there's so many barometers to measure different things. Like I think about gut feeling or gut instinct. That's a tool that we sharpen over time in our gut. How can a machine have a gut?
Well, I mean, if it does, I hope it has IBS. Hope it gets Crohn's disease if a machine has a gut.
Wait, on the topic of Crohn's disease, let's talk about AI and medicine.
Okay.
What will AI be able to do? What is it able to do now? Because people, I'm sure you've seen the articles, that people are using AI to diagnose, sometimes better than doctors, they say.
So here's what I will say is that there have been what they call edge cases and corner cases, which are like outliers or exceptions to AI being able to help, like large language models being able to help everyday people. But generally in practice, research studies have shown, I think it was 2022 or 2023, there was a research study that specifically looked at large language models for how they might work in a medical context. And what they found is that within 10 interactions or within a few interactions, every single large language model started to put out old debunked science. Right? So you remember that science called phrenology, which was like back in the 1900s, they were like, we're smarter than you because our skull is bigger. And our nose is thinner.
I don't remember, but I just learned something new.
But like that was a whole field of science. It was really bad science, but they were like, yo, the size of your nose or the shape of your nose determines your intelligence, right? Which is all debunked now. Well, all of that stuff went into training these large language. They grabbed the whole internet. And so it starts to spit out a bunch of that junk, right? It also showed that some of those types of systems, like large language models, again, we talked about them lacking empathy and the ability to look at situations with nuance. There was another research study that showed that they also interact with people variably based on what they presume your race is. Right? So, and also large language models were only trained, at least the ones that we see out now, were mostly only trained on the English language. English isn't the only language people speak here. So do we know how well it does and doesn't work for those folks who might be using one of these systems that doesn't speak English as a first language? So that's my only, just some red flags. But there's a lot of benefit to AI in medicine, right? So some of the benefits with AI in medicine is the democratization and the access of specialists, right? So when I was at Google, there was an issue with diabetic retinopathy, which is like when you get diabetes, you're at risk of a condition where you might end up becoming blind, right? And you can't reverse it, but you can prevent it once you've detected it. But in rural India, there might be like 2-3 ophthalmologists in like a whole country's worth of space. People would have to travel 10-12 hours to do it. No, you build an AI model that could read the eye scan, that could see it even in places like a doctor might not be able to because they might be tired or grumpy or their glasses might not be at the right angle. The AI can make that preliminary diagnosis and then they could start to get treatment much faster. So I think in areas where AI is contained and being used for specific use cases to help a human be better at their job in medicine, it's perfect. When you want AI to do the job itself, it's so new as a technology, it's just not. Like, would you right now go in and let an AI give you a body scan and then start you on a chemo treatment it determines?
No.
Exactly, because we don't trust it yet. It's not there. We know the technology ain't there. If New York City can't get their chatbot to not make up stuff about their laws, what makes you think that I feel confident that Kaiser Permanente is going to have some AI that's going to be better than the doctor I'm paying, right? I think we just need more time to get there.
Something I think about a lot is this concept of, a lot of people think about it, of this concept of truth. What is true? You and I were talking earlier about how people used to search on Google and now they're starting to ask ChatGPT the questions. So can you talk a little bit about how things are changing and how people are, starting to trust different systems and what that looks like and what it could look like in the future?
Yeah, 100%. So look, I mean, the robots aren't coming, they're already here. I've been saying that for 5 years. Now they're really here. So the thing with truth, right, is that for all of modern history, like the last couple of centuries and, even thousands of years, all information and knowledge sharing has been about creating places where people can select their own source of information. So if you look at a library, right? That's all a library is. It's one building where there's a whole bunch of source materials, and you, as the person seeking knowledge, get to go in and find it. Look at universities, same thing. Here's a whole bunch of knowledge we're offering. You get to pick the major and the classes that you have, right? So, and then that translated digitally into the original Google search, which is like you look for something, and then you get a list of potential sources of places you could go to get the info. So now with AI, basically empowering all these content platforms and their recommendation engines to be so sticky, which is code word for addictive, a lot of that traffic is moving away from these OG search sources and now moving into these algorithmic platforms. So people will use ChatGPT to search. They'll use Perplexity to search. I heard stories of teachers at school districts telling their children and their students to use ChatGPT as a search engine, even though that's not at all what it is or what it should be used as, right? And so now when you think about even just the AI overviews that all of these platforms are doing, right, where they're just having AI answer the question for you, people cognitively, when they see those summary answers, even if they know there's a potential they could be wrong, are less likely to scroll down and select a source if it's provided for them, right? And so I think what we're going to see in the future, in addition to techniques that are going to be used to mitigate deep fakes. So we're going to know when something came out of an AI. That's a law, y'all. Like there's 2 laws that were passed that require that. Like you're starting to see ChatGPT watermark things. The other challenge that we're going to see is what is reality and who gets to decide that when most people are only going to 1 or 2 sources for their information, and what new sort of barriers or protective measures do we need to put in place to protect our own minds from being manipulated by information out of these systems? So that calls into question cognitive security. So we know about cybersecurity, right, which is protecting your computers from hackers. What about cognitive security, which is about protecting your thinking process from manipulation by algorithms, protecting the computer in your head, if you will? And I don't think that we have a solid field that is even studying this yet, the effects of these types of systems. Even cognitive security, as I understand it from my time in the military, it's a DOD term that comes from like cybersecurity and PSYOP type stuff. Like they look at it as both protecting the mind and the technical systems. Cognitive security, as is discussed in computer science, only talks about security algorithms. It doesn't talk about like deep fake prevention or like teaching kids the skills or everyday adults the skills they need to know that, like, no, Trump was not, or the Pope was not in a puffer coat, or like, no, that picture of Taylor Swift nude is not real. It's being generated by an AI system, right? Or like, hey, that's actually not your grandchild calling you. That's a scammer calling you that voice cloned your kid, right? Like these are all new realities we have to live in, that we have to find and develop the proper mental models to guard against and the education to support that, the right policy infrastructure, actual rules and regulations about how these systems can be used, and then the actual technical infrastructure, which is what is Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all these people doing to make sure that teenagers are not falling in love with their chatbots?
What are they doing?
That's a combination too. I can't tell you because I'm not inside these companies anymore, but I tell you they are doing things, I guarantee you. Like the EU, European Union has a bunch of laws like the DMA, the DSA, so the Digital Markets Act, the Digital Services Act, the AI Act, all require heavy amounts of like care and system design to protect children from like being manipulated or ending up dependent on or addicted to those systems or violating their privacy. In the US, we have a law for that too. It's called COPPA, the Children Online Privacy Protection Act. And that would be enforced by the FTC if they still stick around long enough to enforce it. Hopefully. Wow. That was a lot of info.
No, I love it though. I feel my brain's like exploding every time you talk, which is good. Okay, I want to talk about bullying for a second. You know, I often think about like Monica Lewinsky, who spends so much of her time talking about online bullying, not just through her own lens and her own experience, but you know, she's watching it get amplified over time. Like since social media came out, every woman is subject to this level of scrutiny. Every person, not just women. And now, you know, you were telling me the other day about there's an undressing app that you can take a photo of someone, and kids are doing this in schools. You can take a photo of someone and then the app undresses that person and creates like a generated image of them naked. So what's happening there? What are we seeing?
generative artificial intelligence is causing a worldwide crisis in high schools because of this undressing phenomenon. So what's happening is there are websites strictly dedicated to this, but there are also tools and technologies you can download completely free on your computer that no one can control once you've downloaded them, where you can take an image of someone, say a screenshot of a teenager in high school, and you can take that image of them, put them inside of these websites, and it regenerates that image as a pornographic image, right? Now, what's happening in high schools around the country is high school kids are doing this to their classmates. And this is not just in the US. It's an endemic in the US to the point where the city of San Francisco sued 16 different undressing websites in a class action lawsuit to try to force them to come down so that this endemic would stop. But you look at the news, you'll find people in China talking about this, people in India, people in the Netherlands, and by people, I mean government officials trying to address the real crisis that this is causing. So when you and I went to high school, bullying meant I don't like your outfit. Bullying meant you like the person that I like. Bullying meant you're into a subject that I don't like, and in rare cases resulted in physical violence. Often was a lot of mental torture, right? Now it's a whole nother level because this introduces sexual violence at the click of a button regularly introduces the risk of that into your child's everyday experience. And the gag is that it might not even be illegal in your state. In the state of California, it wasn't until August of last year that we updated the criminal code to be able to go get people for doing deep fake AI-generated child images that were inappropriate. And then just this last year, I think it was Matt Haney, he out of San Francisco, I have to double check that. I'm pretty sure just this year they made it a crime to do non-consensual deep fake images of people. So yeah, last August, they passed a law to make it illegal to make non-consensual deep fake images of people and make it a misdemeanor. Before that, it was only a civil lawsuit. In most states in the United States, doing that to somebody is only a civil crime. And then they have to sue you in a civil court, and the max fine is like $1,000 or $2,000, right? And so again, a piece of this is this technology is coming so fast that the problems are popping up faster than we're addressing them. So while we're all here arguing on the internet about who won the beef between Kendrick and Drake, your child is at school at risk of being mentally tortured, at risk of being abused in a whole different way. And this is not just abuse from other children. There was a man in Pennsylvania who was sentenced to 40 years in prison. He was a child psychiatrist who was taking photos of his patients and using that type of software to regenerate them. He was taking pictures of his patients' parents when they were kids and regenerating them using this type of software to make AI-generated child sexual abuse images. Right? And this is happening, it's flooding the internet right now. This is a very serious problem. So yes, I love making Studio Ghibli images. I'm someone who always wishes that I could have taken art classes, but we were too poor to take it. So I get the benefit of these systems. I love being able to work my imagination out and make up little comic strips and characters and ideas much faster, things that were too expensive for me to do before. But that shouldn't be. But the convenience of me being able to exercise my imagination that way should not come at the expense of the safety of this next generation of children. And I think we need to, as the adults in this situation, take a real hard look at what we're allowing to happen to this next generation of children. So while we're all up here bitching about boomers not leaving us the ability to buy houses, we're not even allowing high schoolers the ability to post images of themselves without risking it being turned into something dangerous, serious, and criminal on a civil and a federal level. The FBI has already said that this is illegal. That you cannot have you can't have real human children in no sexual positions. You can't have AI-generated children in no sexual. That's illegal. It's illegal, period. Right?
It should be.
It should be. It needs to be. It is. It already is fucking illegal. And so what we're seeing now is this argument start to surface online that they should let people do it because at least they're doing it with AI-generated images and not real kids. That is totally backwards. That is not the right answer. Research shows that the people who are more likely to abuse is not because they actually have a sexual affiliation to them. It's because they're actual psychopaths. So giving a psychopath some AI-generated images ain't gonna stop them from being a psychopath. You know what I'm saying? So you're just seeing now also how the moral norms that we've held and understood to be acceptable behavior for so long are being pushed, pulled, and attempted to be rewritten by the introduction of these AI technologies. It wouldn't be cool if it was human, so why should it be cool if it's AI? It wouldn't be cool for me as a human to go watch 1,000 hours of surgery videos on spinal replacements on YouTube and then show up at Kaiser trying to do a surgery without nobody checking me and me going to medical school and getting board certifications. We have processes to ensure things are quality enough to work on humans. So why is it okay that some developer in the basement of his mama house in Silicon Valley can make a medical AI, go sell it to a company and then turn it on without testing it? Because that's absolutely possible right now and it's actively happening. If you don't believe me, you can look up an open AI tool called Whisper. It's a transcription tool, which means that when you go in your doctor's office, they turn on the Whisper tool and it's supposed to capture what you guys are talking about to make it easier to write the notes. Well, the Whisper tool is built on a large language model that doesn't understand language and is at risk of doing what? Hallucinating. So there was a Wired article that just came out that were like, everyone knows these large language models are making stuff up in the Whisper tool, but nobody cares. And they're keeping it turned on. So that means you could go in the doctor, tell them stuff, and an AI tool make up stuff they didn't say or make up stuff you didn't say. And there's no way to verify that. At what cost? Why are we so shackled to convenience that we're giving up our actual lives for it? You feel me? So I just want the same type of standards that we put on humans. We don't let nobody just go and start doing surgery on people. You got to train. You got to have a bunch of people vouch for you, a bunch of experts that are already vetted in the field. There's a license. There's a certification process. There are standards you have to uphold in your personal conduct and your professional conduct, or you could lose your license for something completely unrelated to medicine or law. Right? Same thing. Why are we turning on these AIs like that? Why are you turning on an AI in that capacity? I don't feel comfortable with that. And I don't think most people would if they understood how pervasive and how much that's already happening. Like they got AIs that they're using in child protective services in 14 different states to determine if a child should be separated. And this is already after, I think the state of Illinois had done a year-long pilot and showed that the software didn't work and was recommending children be separated on things that had nothing to do with their actual danger level. But states are still using it.
To separate kids from their parents?
Yeah. Yeah.
But how is it measuring? What is it measuring?
So you call in, you make your complaint, right? And then it takes that and it uses AI to assess, like on a scale of 0 to 100, how much is this child in danger? Where like 0 is they're not in danger at all, 100 is like they finna die, right? And so basically what happened was in Chicago, they did this study with about 3,000 kids where they did double blind. So they had the software flagging people at the same time they had their actual social workers flagging people, right? So when they were doing it with the software was flagging people, it had probably 300, I think it was 368 or 365. They had over 360 children who were flagged as like 90% or above, meaning like you're going to die. None of them were in danger. And during that same time period, 2 children actually died while they were in custody because the system had flagged them as not at risk, right? And also they found that there were identity characteristics of the children that were more of a determining factor, like their income level, their zip code, their race, that were more indicative of if the system would say you should be separated than the actual danger that they were in. You see what I'm saying? Because these systems are brittle. They're not perfect. Humans, we could bounce with a little bit of nuance. AI can't do that. And let me explain it. So AI systems are more fragile than Gen Z. You think Gen Z is a snowflake? You ain't met AI yet. You know what I'm saying? Like AI literally is so freaking sensitive. It's sensitive to context and it's sensitive to the data. Let me give you an example. There's an AI app that was made to take a picture of someone's skin and to determine what the condition was on their skin, right? So the app was built, people go in, they're testing it side by side next to dermatologists. Then you see one of them results, internally at least. You see one of these results that's like 98.6% as accurate as the dermatologist. We're ready to turn it on, right? Like the same stuff you see, oh, it passed the bar like a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
So then they turn it on and they turn this dermatology app on, and then when they turn it on, it breaks. Why? Because it's sensitive. What does that mean? Well, all the training data, all the images that they gave it of the skin conditions at first were in very well-lit conditions. They were like studio photographs. So then when you turn it on in an actual hospital, where it's lighting variation it just completely breaks because you didn't give it examples of that skin condition in different lighting conditions. So it doesn't know how to learn from something it doesn't have an example of. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So then now imagine, all right, bet. So you get it in a standard lighting condition, right? But the thing is, it wasn't just good lighting that training data had. It wasn't just studio quality lighting. It was studio quality camera lenses. So now you got doctors taking photos. So one got an Android that they got at Walgreens. Somebody got the new iPhone. Somebody got an iPhone they've had since they started college. The variation of the photo quality will break it unless you gave it examples from all of those kinds of devices, right? And then now imagine you didn't consider that people's skin changes over time. So now you got people taking pictures of a sunburn and it's telling them they got cancer. Because you didn't think about how that context is seasonal. And you didn't add that in. But then you go turn that app on real people. That's what happens with AI when you only select certain worldviews. It's the equivalent of only giving it certain examples of how the world works and then parading it around like it works on behalf of the whole world, which isn't the case. And so these technologies being as sensitive as they are, it's not to say they can't be helpful. It's not to say they won't be helpful. It's to say right now they are very young, and how much do we as people, as users of these systems, want to be the guinea pigs for them until they figure out how to work better? Because the reality is, just as terrible as AI is, there are equally exciting and important use cases on the that allow that technology to be used for good, right? So with AI in education, there's a lot of research that shows that it's like AI usage in classrooms is like messing with kids' ability to like think critically and things like that. But on the flip side, I remember hearing a statistic that in I think it was the state of Illinois, that 80% of the schools in the state of Illinois, there wasn't a single black male child in the 4th grade who was reading at level. Like reading at the 4th grade level. They were all below.
Because
school systems suck.
Okay.
Right? So let's just start with that framing there, right? Or let's take a step back. So around the world, over 300 million children worldwide can't read at all, right? So even just if you are someone who's able to read an Instagram comment, understand you have a whole lot more access than most people in the world. On top of that, in the United States, the average adult who's over 18 reads at a 6th grade level or below, and they comprehend at a 4th grade level or below, right? So that means that the children aren't going to be reading at 12th, 13th, 14th grade levels. And part of our issue with more collective agreement and advancement as a society is around lack of ability to have better conversations, critical debates, all the stuff everyone's talking about, the podcasts, culture, which, like it's because we don't have that intellectual capacity that we would get from reading. Now, why is reading stories important? Because when you read a fiction story, it emulates empathy in your mind. And there's research that shows that people who read fiction are actually better able to read and understand the emotions of people in real life. So the skills you explore while reading fiction actually translate for you in the real world, right? But kids can't read. Well, how do you catch up? People can't afford tutors and their Netflix subscription and their Amazon Plus subscription and their Hulu and their iPhone and their Arcade Plus and the subscription to their printer ink. Like, people can't afford all of that in one, right?
Ugh, damn, we're paying a lot, X.
Seriously. And so there are tools out there to help with this. So 2 tools that are completely free. I'm going to plug shamelessly, not because they're my former employers, but one is called Microsoft Reading Coach. So it's a completely free app where you can go in and you can take material that your kid might be interested in. So let's say that your kid is a big sports friend. They love LeBron James. And a news article just came out about LeBron James. You can take the news article, you can drop it in there. It'll regenerate it at their reading level. And then they can read to it out loud and it'll coach them in real time.
Wow.
And it's 100% free. And it uses AI to do the coaching, the analysis of their voice and their speech, to understand what patterns they have to regenerate the text. But it's not replacing a teacher. What that does is that gives the teacher the ability to not have to be one-on-one with the student. So Google has an app called Read Along that's 100% free in the Android store that does the same thing, where you could just read out loud to it and it coaches you in real time. So like, as much as AI has the potential to harm education, it can also fix a lot of the issues in it. It all comes back down to how we choose to use this technology. So will AI be a superhero or a supervillain? What are we going to choose? What are we going to decide it's going to be? Or are we going to let the tech leaders decide that for us?
I like that question because it gives you agency. And I think it's really important, not just people, but parents and educators to ask themselves that question and to figure out ways. I mean, just by listening to this podcast, you gave so many resources and so much, but you know, how are they gonna use it? How are they gonna help their kids think critically? How are they gonna help their kids learn how to read? Yeah. There are free options now.
Yep.
And people don't know that.
Yep.
And parents don't know that. And I don't know, I'm so into the parenting thing. I'm not a parent yet, but I think about all the time, like if I had a kid now, what would I want to do? Yeah. When I was a kid, you know, what could my parents have done better that I want to do as a parent? I'm sure you think, we've talked about this. Yeah. But it's just such a real thing. And because we are so addicted to our phones, it matters. You know, it's something we do have control over, and we do have agency. As much as we can say, oh, you know, it's scary that AI can do this, it's scary that AI can do that. Well, okay, now that we know those things, what can we use it for that's helpful? And then how can we, you know, maintain those guardrails and boundaries against what's dangerous?
Yeah. I think I love that framing of balancing between both. Like, what can we actually do, while also what do we need to stop from being done?
That was the whole conversation.
The right approach,
there.
right? And I feel like with parents in particular, you know, I get it. Parenting in today is not like it was 50, 60 years ago. It's not like it was even 30 years ago when I was a kid. It's a very, very different world. It's overwhelming. Let's be real, financially, it's a lot more stressful to be a parent right now than it was in 2005. You know what I mean? Just because the way the economy is, the way jobs have changed to where, like, most Americans, I think over 50% of Americans have at least one gig job.
You know what else? I noticed
I mean?
I have a lot of girlfriends who are actually getting sperm donors and having kids on their own. So then you also have the single parent. Mm-hmm. So the
single parent, whether it was by choice or whether it was by separation of the union. You know what I mean? I get how hard it is, but I want to give you this analogy as a parent on how to think about AI. You would not sit your child down, and because they're so loud and rambunctious, you wouldn't give them a Xanax.
Let's hope not.
To calm down. You wouldn't give your kid a tablespoon of promethazine. You wouldn't give your kid a bunch of codeine. You wouldn't give them, you know what I'm saying, to calm down. You might give them some chamomile tea, but you're not going to give them like an actual drug that you know is harmful for them. So my challenge to parents is, why are you giving them digital drugs? Why are you sitting your kid down in front of a device that is known to be just as harmful as any of those substances that will stop your child's ability to develop cognitively fully? From their amygdala being triggered too much, from their ability to filter out irrelevant information is what happens. So my question to parents is, if you wouldn't give your child a drug to calm them down so that you can get a break and relax, why would you give them a digital drug to calm down, right? Though the way in which this technology, specifically the short form content, specifically the recommendation systems and how they use attention and manage flow and all that type of stuff, the large language models that they like more than humans, right? All of that stuff coming to you, your child, is like a drug at their doorstep. And for you to be willing to drop it off is the same thing as rolling up the line of cocaine for your kid and saying, here, have fun in the room, and hoping they don't snort it. And so I think that we have a responsibility as people to ask ourselves, yes, we can be real. We have a responsibility as not just the parents, because I'm not a parent either, but I have 10 nieces and nephews. It doesn't make me an authority on being a parent by any means, but I understand this technology deeply and want to warn parents, including my 8 brothers and my 7 brothers and sisters who I've had these conversations with, right? The technology is already here. It's going to be a part of how they live their lives moving forward, just like cannabis is legal. It's going to be an option for them moving forward. In California, shrooms are legal. It's going to be an option that they can choose moving forward. You don't trust that there will never be more options. You trust that you can build a child who has enough integrity, who has enough discipline, and who has enough love within themselves and for themselves to choose the things that are good for them. And as we move forward in the future, those choices for bad things are only going to get stronger, especially as you talk about humanoid robots coming around. We already have humanoid sex robots that are available for purchase, right? Now you have, this her fantasy, like the movie coming alive, where you have children falling in love with chatbots, preferring chatbots as friends, right? So now it's not about, it shouldn't be an option for them to make an imaginary friend. It should be you as a parent saying, my child is not going to have imaginary friends and is going to know enough information about why and have enough love for themselves. So even when they can technically, if I ban it in the household, they would still choose not to.
And you know what else? Something that you said before about how, yeah, obviously the chatbot says what they want to hear and is probably friendlier than a human and a little easier to deal with. Well, you know what? Teach your kids conflict resolution skills. Teach your kids, how to be empathetic when someone's going through a hard time, because a computer can't do that for you.
No. In fact, research in 2024, there was a research paper that, again, showed LLMs lack nuance and empathy, right? Because empathy is the nuance. The things that you're trying to automate away by having a conversation with ChatGPT about your feelings so it parrots you and tells you were right no matter what you're doing, you know what I mean? Is automating away that part of your kid that's needed to be successful. And so again, parents, do not let your kids use AI to make imaginary friends and end up with no friends in the real world, because that's happening right now. Don't do it.
This is the last question I ask everyone on my podcast. And it's because I find that there's so much that we have to say and so many important messages that we all want to share, that it's sort of hard. It's hard to put them in order of what's the most important to us. So this hypothetical scenario will help you narrow it down. Okay? So you're at the Oscars and you're nominated for, let's say, a documentary about AI. And they announce the nominees. Finally, they announce the winner, and it's you. And you get up to the stage and you thank everyone you need to thank, your parents, God, the AIs, whatever, whoever you want to thank.
AIs.
Not that I don't know.
Thank you, ChatGPT. 4.0, y'all, 4.0, or that new Gemini that just dropped.
So you thank everyone you need to thank.
Yeah.
And then finally, there's about a 45-second to 1 minute window where you can say whatever you want. And there's going to be headlines. It's going to go viral. It's going to be all over the news. What message is so important to you that you would share it in that window?
The world that we live in right now is the product of other people's imaginations. The technology that we see coming to market is the brainchild of Isaac Asimov and his science fiction escapades. I am the imagination of my grandmother, who was a Black woman who was born in the South in Georgia in the early 30s and was listed as being a farm worker at 8 years old. But she imagined a future where her lineage would live different. And now here I am as a product of that. And the information that I would probably share in a documentary would be to make people aware and excited and invigorated and emotional enough to actually care enough to shape what comes next. And I think we all have an active role in that my favorite quote, all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. That changing your own life is changing everyone else's life and does make a difference in the world, just like helping other people change their lives makes the world a better place. And we have to do more proactively imagining the future instead of reacting to the reality that other people designed for us. And that's what I want the world to know.